Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faerie Conclave. This is episode 125. I'm your host, Alec. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm super excited to be joined by an extra special guest. It's SK Altered. I was really excited when you reached out because I've been following you on Instagram for a long time. Will you please introduce yourself and a little bit of your background with Magic and what you do in the community?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm SK and I go by SK Altered kind of everywhere people talk about Magic online. And I started doing altars, which are paintings on Magic cards, maybe 2018. And it was just something that happened in the shop. Someone said, "Oh, I know that you draw. I know that you're an artist. Can you do something on my card?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I think so." I thought about it and nothing ended up happening. And then I was playing my own deck, and I thought, there are these basic lands, these John Avon full art basic lands that I thought were so beautiful. They're kind of expensive, especially back in the day. There weren't as many different printings. And I looked, there was also a part of me that just loved the way the old border looked on lands. I said, well, I can make a full art old border land, and I'll just extend one of the old John Avons. Kind of gave it a whirl. And I was like, actually, this really works. It looks good. And then people started seeing me play with this kind of basic mountain I had in my deck out in shop. And that's sort of where altars began for me. Since 2020, I've been doing it as a full-time job, and I take commissions and people say, I want, X, Y, or Z on a card. We'll talk about it. Or sometimes they'll say, I want something. What ideas do you have? And a lot of my pieces draw on art history, and I like finding things that kind of resonate with the meaning of what the Magic card does already.
I love that. I have so much respect for altar artists. It's really cool to see how I feel like the last couple years, as more like Secret Layers and other cards have come out that kind of change the boundaries of what we used to think could be done on a Magic card, I feel like altar artists are going to be the inspiration for that. And I see a lot of kind of like Wizards will take some ideas, and then the altar artists will be like, oh, I really like this thing they did with the Secret Layer, and kind of take some ideas. I feel like all of that just adds so much to the community. Not to mention, my experience with altars is back around 2018. I had a deck that I loved, and a couple of the arts in it just didn't fit the theme of the deck, but mechanically they were kind of necessary. And I didn't really like playing them, but the deck really needed these cards. And so one of my friends was like, oh, you should I follow a couple of these cool artists that alter cards and they can paint over the art. And for some reason that had just never occurred to me as an option. So yeah, I hired an artist and shipped out my cards and got them back a little while later. And it was just it felt so right because the mechanics were perfect for the deck, and now it felt like the art matched up with the rest of the theme. Yeah, I just thought that was really cool. Ever since then, I've always followed altar artists and been really excited about that whole area of the Magic community. Yeah, so I guess all of this is to say thank you for being a part of the community. You really do add a lot to it. And tell me a little bit more about how this process works, because I feel like these are paintings that I would expect on a big canvas, but you're working with, what is it, 2 inches by 3 inches or something like that?
Yeah, I think in millimeters, 88 by, I think 63.4.
Nice.
It's a very particular Magic card size. And, all of my altars are acrylic. They're all hand painted. I don't use anything that involves any kind of mechanical reproduction because all of my altars began for tournament Magic. I would make cards for very much like you, where people would have a deck, they had a visual identity for the deck or a theme. Something didn't quite fit. The altar would often be that last piece of the puzzle to make it sing. Coming up with altars, it was always really important, and continues to be really important for me, that the paint is incredibly thin. It's flexible. I like my cards to be played with. I've done a few pieces where the clients have told me that they hang out on their wall, but I would say the vast majority are played, and that's what I did. One for Shivam, and he said that he kind of displays it and not plays it. And I'm like, I don't know, Shivam, you should cast it. The Soul Ring, it goes in everything. Come on. But
Yeah.
and in terms of the detail, it's something where, with experience, I start to see how much is possible. And every time I do a piece, I prefer to push myself and learn something new in the making of it. I don't do repeats of images. I tend to avoid play sets. There are a lot of altruists, and at this point, I'm able to be a bit selective about what I take in terms of commission. So I like to, when the idea works for me and the client's interest in what I do. So I feel like I'm constantly learning through making, and that's where some of these pieces that are really quite complicated
Yeah.
push it. I guess I want to go back to two things you said. My first question is what was the card that you switched out, and what was the theme that you wanted it to match?
Ooh, great questions. This was around 2018, 2019. I had a Sagas deck. So this
Mm.
was after Dominaria had come out. So it was like Sagas had just recently been introduced. I think it must have been 2019 because I think we had some Sagas from Dominaria and one other set. So I might be getting the timing mixed up. But anyway, my commander I had for that deck was Atraxa. I kind of wanted it to be like a little Phyrexia themed because of Atraxa. And most of the sagas are like the art is a little bit generic enough that it can kind of fit into that theme. But there were some that were super like, this is a Dominaria moment. And it was like the vibe of the art was just totally different from Phyrexians. So I had two sagas altered, which probably was also even more difficult because the art for a saga is like the long, thin side instead of the
Yep.
normal art box. But yeah, the artist I had did an incredible job and actually painted a tiny Atraxa, like basically destroying Dominaria in the artwork. So yeah, it fit perfectly into the deck, and I was really excited to.
Oh,
And I still play those cards to this day. So
that's great.
yeah,
I mean, I remember when Dominaria came out, and I'd heard that Richard Garfield had worked on the set, and it made me kind of excited. And I saw these weird vertical cards. I said, "Is this magic? Does this feel like magic?" And then, yeah, it really feels like magic. It plays
mm-hmm.
incredibly. It tells a story, and it's like, there's a reason. There's a reason. Richard Garfield. He really knows what he's doing.
Yeah, it turns
And
out, yeah.
I think the arts are just so incredible. Some of the arts that Wizards commissioned were really special from them.
Mm,
I remember there were tapestries and weavings that they would use,
yeah.
and it would be kind of interesting things. And for years, I wanted to do an altar with that vertical frame. I think altars are also a way of showing appreciation for the kind of history of the game, and I just couldn't find the right one. And recently, I ended up doing a piece for artist talent, and it's a class enchantment, so it's not a saga, but it's the same vertical frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been wanting to do one forever, and I ended up choosing to paint a 19th century painting by the artist Gustave Courbet, and it's a self-portrait. And the self-portrait shows him kind of looking bizarrely forward, holding his hair back with his eyes really wide open, and it's a kind of cliche of the artist as a madman. And I love that for artist talent because the mechanics of the card, the story it tells is every time you cast a non-creature spell, you can choose to discard a card. It speaks to that madness, and I think it connects that to talent, to getting more ideas. I felt like the art really resonated with both the framing of the card and actually what it did. I don't know, 5 years later, maybe
Yeah.
longer, finally got that vertical altar in.
That's really cool. I love that story too. And I feel like, similar to what we were talking about with theming of your decks, one thing that has bothered me for eternity is fetch lands. And the thing that reminded me of this was on your Instagram, you did a series of fetch lands that are beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I love this because half of the fetch lands are generally Khans of Tarkir or like Tarkir themed, and the other half are, is it Odyssey when those came out? It was, so I believe it's
Yeah.
like Dominaria basically. Anyway, all this is to say I always have like 3-color decks with a bunch of fetch lands where like 2 match one plane and 1 is a different one. So yeah, I love this series you did with the fetch lands where they're all like, they all have a very similar vibe, and especially for lands, I like all my basics to be the same art. I like all of the non-basics to have a similar vibe.
Oh, that was really fun. That was a pretty special project because with that the proceeds went to charity.
Oh,
I wanted to do this kind of big project and put a lot into it. And my idea for them was I wanted the fetch lands to actually reflect their names. Like, I mean, I think there's like a joke about how islands increasingly are just random objects.
Yeah,
And but I was like, and you think about the fetch lands, a lot of them aren't what they say they are. The polluted delta is not a delta, you know.
totally. Yeah.
And so I was thinking about that, and then was thinking about, I guess, kind of classic fantasy art, and
Hmm.
what a sense of scale is. And I think in that series, the Windswept Heath is, it's a kind of naturalistic depiction of sort of Scottish landscape, a heath, but it has the shadow of a dragon over it.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple years later, those dragon basics came out with the Shadow of the Dragon. I was thinking, huh, interesting.
That seems familiar. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and I do think that with Secret Lairs, it is more common that some altarist has done that type of thing first, and then the company makes their official version second. There are exceptions. I think they challenge altarists to come up with unique ideas and
Mm.
to do what you can do that no one else can do. So I think I have a Calvin and Hobbes the comma piece that I really like. Calvin in so many of the comics, imagines himself as a dinosaur. There's one where his mom is in the kitchen and he's this giant T-Rex and she just says, she's like making him a sandwich and Calvin the T-Rex is holding the sandwich with mayonnaise. I like mustard, just being a kid. And I made it three-headed Zakama. But Bill Watterson doesn't license. So there's no possibility. You will never get a Calvin and Hobbes secret lair.
Right.
There's no possibility of that. You want that hand painted.
Nice. What do Magic players love more than customizing their decks? And how could you possibly customize your deck more than having like one of a kind hand painted artwork on your cards? Yeah, it's really cool. Sweet. Okay, I think it's time we talk about one of your favorite decks, which I probably should have mentioned up at the top that would be a piece of what we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into it. And looking through this deck list, I'm like, this is going to be a fun one to talk about. Really quick, before we get into it, I always shout out one of my patrons at the Conclave Mentor patron level. So Lee, thank you so much for being a patron. I really appreciate it. Let's kick things off. Please introduce your deck and what inspired you to put it together in the first place.
All right. So my commander is Adun Oakenshield. He's a reader, not because there's a ton of text on him, but because he goes all the way back to Legends. And I think that part of what drew me to Adun is just the nostalgia of the look and feel of a card of that age. And then these characters that have large flavor text often, but you just don't know what their story is. I was totally entranced. Like, who are these people? When you look through the original Legends and look at the Legends, not all of them really hold up as commanders today.
Right.
One of my first decks I ever built was Hazazon Tamar, the original 7-mana one.
Cool.
Pretty fun.
Yeah.
And, not horrible. But Adun was one I had wanted to get for so long, and someone was selling a damaged copy of it. Corner is bent. And I had just been holding off because it's an old card and sort of overpriced for how not very good it is.
Yeah.
And when I got this damaged card and said, all right, I'm gonna brew with this. I guess I should say what Adun does.
Yeah.
He's Jund colors, and he's a 1/2 for 3 mana, and he has an activated ability for Jund, and tap him, and you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. The thing about Adun is it goes to your hand. It doesn't go to play. This isn't Marin.
Right. Yeah.
And my experience of playing with him these days, and I play this deck a lot, I really love it, is people read it and they think, oh my gosh, these things are coming back. It's like, well, they're coming back, but it doesn't go to play. And they're like, oh, never. Okay, cool.
That's so funny. Yeah. Kind of in the defense of bad graveyard commanders, I started playing Commander with the Marin Precon, and even in 2015, I still felt bad playing it because it felt too strong. Like, my play group at the time was such a baby group. That deck was basically unbeatable in that meta. Something I learned pretty quickly, at least in the Commander format, is how much I enjoy when things have lots of restrictions. And
Yep.
so I'm always on the lookout for, like, Edge of Eternities has this new mono black legend that brings creatures back, like a tap ability that brings creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield, but it like erases their abilities, so they come back as vanilla creatures.
Oh, that
And
one looks so cool. And they're skeletons.
yeah, and it turns them into skeletons. So like the flavor of it, I love. The restrictions that make it not great, I also love.
Yep.
So yeah, that's like a deck I'm brewing around. And yeah, I have a couple other graveyard decks that are, the commanders are essentially Marin but way worse, but I find them to be so much more fun that way because you kind of have to find cool ways to get around those restrictions. So
And building with restrictions is just such a pleasure, I think. I think the initial impulse to build this was as simple as, like, it was nostalgic. It brought kind of sense of fun to bring back on this type of old card. You didn't see it too often. That seemed like it could be okay. But if that were all, I would have long since stopped playing this. Like, I play this deck a lot. I've been playing it for years. And I think the thing that keeps me playing it is it does something that is sufficiently different from any other commander. And I've found a way to let it kind of scale with the game because it cares about creatures. Even though this is an old bad Legends card, turns out creatures are getting better.
yeah.
And so when spoiler season comes out, I look, Aiden, things happen. And the fairly narrow set of things that I was interested in doing with it, that actually makes me excited to look out for the other fairly narrow set of things that could still come. The fact that it does have this kind of brewing puzzle is part of it. And I think that's part of why it has that longevity for me.
Totally. Okay, I'm excited to get into some of these specific card choices. So could you talk a little bit more about this deck's history since you first put it together and maybe some of the things you've learned?
Yeah, so I think when I first built it, I knew that I wanted it not care about things being in the hand. That's Aiden 1.0. And there weren't a ton of things that came to mind. The first and one that's still in the deck, the fun card, is Tetzimoc, Primal Death.
Cool.
From Ixalan. Was the bane of limited. Just one of the most bomb cards you could possibly pull. So Tetzimoc is black 4 for a 6/6 death touch. And it has an ability, 1 black, reveal Tetzimoc from your hand, put a prey counter on target creature. And you can activate only during your turn. Although not at sorcery speed, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And when it enters the battlefield, destroy each creature your opponents control with a prey counter on it. And so that ability, Tetzimoc can only be played from in hand. And Aiden lets you, even if Tetzimoc dies or Tetzimoc's discarded, you can redo this ability. So that's natural. But Tetzimoc is not in and of itself a deck. It isn't a win con, it isn't a strategy. And that sort of speaks to Aiden 1.0. I was just trying to do things that were specific to in the hand. I didn't really know a strategy yet. And another card that I loved back from my constructed days was Sneak Attack.
Ooh.
And Sneak Attack, that one people know. That's a mean, busted card.
Yeah.
But it does involve putting things in from your hand. And Aiden's ability can be used at instant speed. So it's like, okay, that's a kind of good fit. And then, what's another classic powerful card? Survival of the Fittest. You discard things from your hand and search. So in Aiden 1.0, I had Survival and I had Sneak Attack and I had Tetzimoc. Tetzimoc's still in the deck, Survival and Sneak Attack aren't. What I found is that kind of build really lent itself to kind of John Good stuff. And that's not my cup of tea. It was okay, but it just didn't feel particularly flavorful or unique. And at a certain point, I realized that one thing Aiden could do that not many other commanders can do is it lets you replay cast triggers. If you're casting something and it's cast from your hand, you get the bonuses of those things. And so that led me to Eldrazi. And cool. I thought, well, actually, Jund Eldrazi, that's cool. There was no commander that let you play the colored Eldrazi comfortably or easily at that point. I liked that it was kind of against the grain there. Thinking, okay, I got a deck for Worldbreaker. Worldbreaker's a great card. And so I would say Aiden 2.0, I brought in the Eldrazi, but it wasn't full on Eldrazi deck yet because the other thing that I realized was really good. One of my favorite cards that has the text from the hand is Sunbird's Invocation. That became a real cornerstone of the deck. It's one red, 5 colorless, an enchantment, and says whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value X or less from among the cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost, for the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So similar to Cascade. It's actually better than Cascade because you get the full mana value, it's not one less. You get to see all of them and then choose from among them. And I've played with the card enough at this point that it's like those upsides are no joke. Building around Sunbird's Invocation, if you don't have something with a high mana value in your hand to cast, it's a lot less good. The kind of deck building puzzle of Aiden that between 1.0 and 2.0 I figured out is that there are different ways you could try and deal with this ability to return it. It costs 3 mana to return things, 1 card from your graveyard to your hand. And so one of my first versions of Aiden that involved cast triggers was like, well, maybe it's kind of a stormy deck. You play a lot of little things, and then you play, what is it, AV? Or I forget the name of the ooze that has Storm, that copies itself as a creature. For each creature you cost 4. Turns out that if you're paying 3 mana to return a 1-drop or a 2-drop or a 3-drop, what percentage of that spell is it? Turns out what actually works pretty well is if you're returning a 10-drop that's actually impactful, and you pay 3 mana to return that 10-drop, it actually feels like the juice was worth the squeeze there.
Right.
And so Aiden 2.0, I had that insight. I realized cost reducers are good, things that let you play the cards that are in your hand, and then things that are payoffs forecasting from hand with a high mana value. And so it ends up having this high mana value matters sub-theme.
Cool.
But it's a result of building around from the hand. I think I sent you this older list that I had, because when I play in a particular event, sometimes I'll save the list just as a way to kind of memorialize that experience. So I played in the Sheldon Memorial stream, and I saved that older list, and it's interesting looking at what has changed in that list versus the modern Aiden list. Aiden 3.0 after Modern Horizons 2. Where's it 3?
Hard to know, honestly.
Yeah. All of these new Eldrazi came out. There was finally a density of kind of colorless payoffs that some of the ideas I'd had rolling around on the deck earlier were worth building around. And the really strange thing that I did that was a big change for me is I removed the basic lands from the deck.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's not really a Jund commander. It's really 4-color. At that point, it's Jund plus colorless. And I'm really prioritizing non-basic lands that also tap for colorless. Such a fun brewing challenge, and I haven't looked back.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like any deck brew that challenges kind of the standard template that we would think of for a commander deck, I'm always interested in. So just saying I'm building this deck with no basic lands and treating colorless as a 4th color, like I'm already super interested in seeing what that looks like. Nice. So that's kind of where we're at today, is with the Aiden version 3.0, super Eldrazified.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say one of the best from the hand payoffs that really is a centerpiece of 3.0 is Zuladoc.
Yes.
Zuladoc came out before MH3, and I remember when it was spoiled, I was like, is this an Aiden card? I was like, it says from the hand on it. You have to cast the mana value 7 or greater from your hand. I think I added 1 or 2 after MH3 and a couple of support cards, but it ended up being worth it. And, Zuladoc is definitely one of the meanest, best cards you can possibly have on the battlefield in any deck that runs it.
Yeah, it's true. The revelation to focus on the cast from hand line that's really clever, because so many decks focus on the enters the battlefield effects, and that's why cast exists, is to kind of like nerf that. So it's exactly like what we were talking about earlier with restrictions. So it's like, how do we play around with this kind of nerfed version of something else but still make it very, very strong? And yeah, clearly looking at a lot of these cast triggers on the cards that you have in this deck, and then thinking about when they go to the graveyard, bring them back with your commander, cast them again. It's really cool and really interesting, but it's not like unfair, right? You still have to pay the mana cost for the most part to cast these cards.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay, fair. Yeah, maybe there's some other ways to get around that. Sweet. Yeah, besides the healthy amount of mana ramp in this deck, how else do you go about casting these large Eldrazi?
Yeah, definitely cost reducers. Anything, and I think Eye of Ugin is obviously the signal one, probably the best one. But green has some good ones. Goreclaw, really good. Nylea, really good. I guess here I'll talk about probably my favorite cost reducer. That's a 3.0 edition. That's Heartless Summoning.
Yes. Okay. I love this card.
This is a card I've been wanting to play for so long in Aiden. Heartless Summoning is 1 and a black. Enchantment says creatures you control get -1/-1. Creatures you cast cost 2 less. It is so fun, and it can be really busted. It's a card similar to Zulodok. I'd been wanting to play it in Aiden forever, but when I look at my old list, the kinds of cards that felt like they did, Sakura Tribe Elder is an example of a card that really doesn't work well with Heartless Summoning. Because when you play Sakura Tribe Elder, it dies immediately as a state-based action. You cannot sacrifice it and get your land drop. Grist is a really cool card that I played in earlier versions of the deck because he's a creature when he's not in play, so you can recur him with Aiden.
Cool.
But Grist makes 1/1 insects. So those were sacrifices, and I think the bigger sacrifices, some of the more powerful cards that were printed in MH3 are these Eldrazi Spawns and Scions. Writhing Chrysalis is a card that the deck would be better with that, or maybe it would be better, playing a lot of these kind of intermediary payoffs. I want to play Heartless Summoning. I want to play this big, splashy, crazy thing. And the thing is, Aiden is a 1/2. I felt like the fact that he doesn't die to Heartless Summoning, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
That's synergy in air quotes. Yeah, so he doesn't die to Heartless, and the truth is that Heartless Summoning is actively good with things like Eternal Witness, I think, or Fierce Empath cards that do die immediately to it, because you can just recur them immediately. You still get their ETB.
And that's exactly, as we were talking, I was realizing, like, just looking through these creatures, I can tell each one has been thought of in the context of Heartless Summoning. Like, the ones you want to stick around on the battlefield, like Delighted Halfling, Insidious Fungus, they're all 1/2s.
Yep.
But then, the cards that you, like, they have an Enters effect or something, and you're fine with them immediately going to the graveyard, are 1/1s. So there's, like, Elvish Rejuvenator, like you mentioned, Fierce Empath, stuff like that. So yeah, that's really cool. And this is just something I love about this, because I wouldn't have put that together, like, just looking at the deck list. So it's really cool to see that now. And Heartless Summoning has just been one of my favorite cards of all time. I love a card that gives you such a big reward and also such a huge drawback, so it really makes you kind of work for it. Yeah, this is really cool. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, by far the best cost reducer. The card that I thought would be good, but I think is actually broken, is Harrogast.
Yes.
And Harrogast is a new Eldrazi, 9 mana Eldrazi Dragon, 6/6 flying, I believe. Doesn't really matter. It's not about attacking. And it has an emerge cost of red, and 6. It also says creature spells you cast have emerge. What emerge does is you can reduce the colorless part of a spell's casting cost by sacrificing a creature with that mana value. Say I have a Fierce Empath that's sitting there, did its job already. I have a Rexade that's sitting there, did its job already. Tap red, and then you cast Harrogast by sacrificing those 2 creatures. You're casting a 9-drop, which matters for quite a few things in the deck, like Sunbird's Invocation. But then everything in your hand also has emerge. And so if you can chain these large colorless creatures with a Sunbird's Invocation in play, or a Zulodok in play, you get an outrageous number of cast triggers.
So good. Yeah, I clocked this card in the deck immediately, and I was like, okay, at some point I'm going to have to ask about Harrogast. Yeah, because everything in the deck already cares about exactly what that card supports, and it also reduces the mana costs of things. So yeah, it's like everything you need. Okay, so we've kind of hinted at this a little bit just now, but what would you say are some of this deck's weaknesses that you have to keep in mind while you're playing?
I'd say the big one is it is very open to variance. You know, it is a high mana values matter deck in which the commander does nothing to mitigate that.
Fair.
Fundamentally, things you're gonna have some really tough games because of that, or tough mulligans. And so it actually is surprisingly difficult to mulligan with, for sure. But the thing is, that is what I'm going for. I want my deck to be high variance. I like that kind of magic. I wanna get screwed sometime.
Yeah.
Like Richard Garfield made a game where the better player will lose to the worst player, many times. That's fun. That makes for repeatability. And so sometimes though, when I'm like mulling to 4 and it's like I couldn't keep that opening hand that had 2 lands, I know that isn't really tenable. I'm like, that's a bummer, Or sometimes I'm like, I keep the opening hand that has 5 lands because I know it's sort of right, but it's like I just keep drawing lands. Like, oh well, so it goes. And I would say a secondary weakness is spell-based combo or aggro. Actually, maybe even worse than spell-based combo is true aggro. A really fast aggro deck will just get under it. The deck loves the mid to late game for sure.
Are there any other cards, like individual cards, that you would like to shout out that we haven't talked about yet that just kind of like do something spicy in this deck?
Oh man, there's so many weird ones. I'll name a new one. This one's kind of fun because this is the most recent addition to the deck is Ancient Adamantoise from Final Fantasy. This is 8 mana for an 8/20, Vigilance, Ward 3. And it says damage isn't removed from this creature during cleanup step. All damage that will be dealt to you and other permanents you control is dealt to this creature instead. And then when this creature dies, exile it and create 10 tapped treasure tokens. And so the way this is templated, the dies trigger can be responded to by Aiden's ability at instant speed. So you will get the treasure tokens and return it to your hand.
Oh, cool.
Before it gets exiled, yeah.
Nice.
If you can cheat this in some way, or if you just, you get 8 mana and slam it, it actually buys you quite a bit of time. But the thing is, 20 damage might not be enough. The deck it really wants to get to the mid to late game.
Yeah.
So being able to play that twice is pretty sweet. Yeah.
Nice.
I guess I'd say another notable, this is obvious, is the Apex Devastator. That's great in any deck that plays it. But Aiden is a deck that you can replay it. It's not an ETB, it's a cast trigger.
Yeah.
But a cast trigger of 4 Cascades, that's definitely worth paying 3 more mana.
Yeah, that's a lot of cast triggers.
Yeah. And those are kind of like notable cards that are just really good and powerful on their own that are lightly synergistic with Aiden.
Cool. I really like that. What would you say is, out of all the cards that we've talked about, is the MVP card of this deck?
I was thinking about this question. I know you asked it, and it's like there are a lot of cards that have these small synergies, but I think that the MVP, the card that really brought this from Aiden 1.0 to Aiden 2.0, is Kozilek the Great Distortion.
Ooh.
So Kozilek the Great Distortion is colorless, 8, 12/12. When you cast Kozilek the Great Distortion, if you have fewer cards than 7 in a hand, the draw cards equal to the difference. So it gives you a full grip. Menace, and then it says discard a card with mana value X, counter target spell with mana cost X. The Kozilek actually kind of cares about many of the things the deck cares about, which you might not think about at first. It has a cast trigger right off the bat that draws you cards. Very good. Often draws you 3, 4, 5 cards. Equally important, if you have Aiden in play, Kozilek's ability, discard a card with mana value X, you can activate Aiden to return something from your graveyard of the mana value you want to counter the spell.
Ooh.
And so not only your hand is available to have the right mana value, but anything in your graveyard that's a creature. That's one that, you get people with that. That one's really good. Often, if you have a Kozilek and an Aiden both active on the board, you're the arch enemy at that point.
Yeah.
And people are just trying to throw stuff at you. And part of why Kozilek is so good is he helps you seal the deal, gives you that interaction on the stack.
I love that. Well, that actually kind of perfectly took us into now. Normally, I would ask about pet cards in this deck. Kind of hard for a deck like this that you've been playing for so long that is full of pet cards. But yeah, are there any that you would like to highlight for this one?
I definitely do. I got a special answer for this one. This
Ooh,
card,
perfect.
let me just say, it is not good enough to make the cut. If you're crazy enough to run Aiden, which I don't think anyone will be, but if you are, don't run this unless you don't care about winning. But Planar Gate, this is one of my favorite cards in the deck. This is straight from Legends Spoiler Season. 6 mana for an artifact. Pay up to 2 less than required whenever casting a summon spell. With flavor text, Neria reach through the gate, sensing the energies trapped beyond, and a sweet Melissa Benson art. This card, I just love this card. It's from the original Legends set, same set as Aiden. So I kind of like, it makes me think about those old things. The way that it says, whenever casting a summon spell, it feels kind of nostalgic and out of touch.
Yeah.
Melissa Benson is the artist who drew Shivan Dragon, and
Oh,
really amazing, very clearly hand done art. And she also has this really unusual signature, this chop of an M. And you see it in Shivan Dragon. And I remember as a kid, I always liked her art for Balduvian Hydra from Ice Age, had that big M, and I always thought about, oh, what a cool signature. And for SK, I use this kind of backwards S and a K, like a stamp, sort of thinking about Tolkien's signature, but I'm also thinking about Melissa Benson here. So Planner Gate's
cool.
in for its flavor. For years, I ran it. It's been in the deck since 1.0.
Yeah.
I've always been like, I just want to jam Planner Gate. But for years, I'd be like, well, why am I not playing the Immortal Sun? The Immortal Sun is also 6, makes your spells cost 1 less, so not 2 less, but you draw an extra card, and Planeswalker's abilities can't be activated. So it kind of pretty powerful hosing your opponents. And, well, MH3 gave me the best excuse. And this one is so fun. Planner Gate, I read the text, but it has one other quality that is a tiny advantage in air quotes, over Immortal Sun. It's not a legend. So
Oh.
MH3 brought us Echoes of Eternity. If a triggered ability of a colorless spell triggers an additional time whenever you cast a colorless spell, copy it. So Planner Gate's colorless spell. If you cast that, you get 2 Planner Gates. Your creature spells
Ooh.
cost 4 less. And
Oh,
it's
that's so
actually
good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's like, finally, it has a reason. Instead of Immortal Sun, I play Planner Gate.
Yeah, totally. I love that. That's really good. It's exactly the kind of thing we've been talking about this whole time too, which is the cost reducers are just super important. Colorless spells with high mana values are really important. Yeah, and I can also confidently say that Planner Gate is a card I don't think I've ever seen before. So it has that added
Yeah,
like, ooh, this is cool. Yeah, I like it.
yeah.
Okay, so I am excited about this next one. What has been your favorite in-game moment that you've had while you've played this deck?
It's not a singular moment. It's something that happens fairly frequently, but it is so particular that it's like just winning in at instant speed with this deck in response to dying.
Ooh.
So fun, or in response to a board wipe. It's just incredible because this big stompy deck is not a deck you expect to kill a whole table out of 1 or 2 cards in hand and 1 or 2 permanents, non-land permanents in play, and it can definitely do that with the right permanents. And it happens, I don't know, every 10th game. It's like not that
Fun.
uncommon. And really, the way that typically works is there's some sort of free spells enabler in play, which will be Zuladoc or Sunbird's Invitation. And then you play something that creates a kind of cascading series of things, which could be any colorless spell with Zuladoc, anything big with Sunbirds. And then you get Harrogast, making the things free. So and then all of these the deck has, I think, 15 or 16 fierce empath targets, creatures that cost more than 6.
Cool.
So when you get those draw 7s, you often can play another one for free. And if you have Psychosis Crawler in play, or Greater Good, all of which are things you can cascade into, it's not that uncommon to just burn out the table through Psychosis Crawler triggers. And Psychosis Crawler plus Echoes of Eternity, that makes 2 copies of Cyclosis Trawler that trigger once. 1 card, 4 damage to each opponent. All of those can be played at instant speed with Liberator or the Battle Thopter. So not that uncommon, especially combined with Feedborn Muse. That's just very satisfying.
Yeah, that's really cool. I do appreciate a deck that has kind of like a slow build, but then once it has those kind of crucial pieces, it can just explode out of nowhere and suddenly you're drawing 14 cards, dealing a ton of damage, getting things out for free. Yeah, that's always when your turn takes 10 minutes and you're smiling the whole time. I love that.
Yeah. I try to play fast about it. I try to not care about the most optimal plays. And I try to tell people that, like, this deck is like, it's a solid 3. It can take a long turn if things really get going. You make it to that late game, it can do some flashy things and it wants to.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Okay. I mean, you've got me interested, but if anybody else out there is interested in building a deck similar to this, what advice would you give them?
Well, I'll say the first, it's just so dumb, but the advice is don't build Aiden. Build a slightly better version. And there aren't a ton, but I think there are 2 like non-reserve list options, and one is popular and good, and that's Henzi, which came out long after I built Aiden. Henzi shares some cards with Aiden, and one you could build a Jund colorless Eldrazi Henzi deck would be pretty cool, and actually would just be probably better because the way Henzi is a cost reducer and cares about things from hand. I think most people build Henzi very strong into the Dye's ability.
Mm-hmm.
But my version of Henzi would be like, it's a cost reducer and it cares about from hand, which would also be cool.
Yeah.
I also think if you were willing to give up red, which, you lose Harrogast and Sunbird's Invocation, which that's tough. But if you were willing to do that, Honest Rutstein is probably pretty good too. It's got a regrowth effect for creature and a cost reducer. So, but I would say if you really say, all right, no, I want Aiden, I want the Legends Commander, decide what kind of deck you want to build. Go back to what I was in 1.0 and be like, do I want to repeatedly return creatures that are really good, or do I want to do what this deck does, which is return 1 or 2 really impactful creatures per game? I think in this deck, it's like if you're playing my list, say you wanted to play this kind of Aiden deck, also be comfortable with the fact that if you played Aiden and you activated him 0 times in a game, that doesn't mean you didn't play with him. Because I cast him, and then you have the threat of activation. I'm always thinking about, I could return something, and sometimes you choose to, sometimes you don't. But that's a big deal. And so if I play Aiden and his major effect was that I sacked him to Harrogast later on, I don't feel bad about it. Every third game, Aiden's returning Apex Devastator multiple times.
Yeah.
He can definitely do the work. I think you have to be comfortable with that, knowing that using your commander's overcosted ability isn't always the best move. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. That doesn't mean that he doesn't matter. You just have to know when to play it.
I like that. I think that's really good advice, and something to kind of consider with other decks too is like if you don't end up playing your commander that game, or if you don't, if your commander doesn't do the thing that it wants to do, but the rest of the deck works fine and is you're making these choices where you're prioritizing your deck over your commander stuff. Yeah, I think there's a tendency to think that means it's not working or it feels bad, but that I like this advice that that's not actually the case and that you shouldn't feel bad about that. Well, that's perfect. A nice little thought to leave people with for the end of the episode. Yeah, I wanted to say, SK, thank you so much for coming on and letting me ask you a whole bunch of questions about your favorite deck and Altarist stuff and everything else we talked about today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the show. Like I told you earlier, I listen while I paint. It's great.
Oh, thank
and
you.
It's really fun hearing about all the passion people put into their decks. And
yeah,
to me, Eternal Magic and EDH, it's all about brewing and kind of being expressive with your decks. And I think that that's why I love it so much. I think that's also what Ultras are about, being expressive with the game that you play. So, more power to that.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree. Those are all the kinds of things that have kept me playing this game and involved in the community for so long. So yeah, it's really cool to like be able to share that with other people. Would you like to shout out where people can find you, and if you have any upcoming events or anything that you would like to talk about?
Oh yeah, so people can find me at SK Altered with the past tense on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, all the socials. I'm especially active on Instagram and Blue Sky. I post alters most weeks, and on Blue Sky, I also talk a little bit more about the process and talk about EDH too. In terms of projects, I'd say, I think with the timing now, I can announce I've got a pretty special altar that I'm going to be releasing pretty soon. And I almost most of my pieces are done through commissions, where if you see me posting, it's been someone already owns it. But I've been interested in doing some pieces where it's my idea, and then I put it out for auction, which is something that I think allows for a little bit more artistic freedom and a little bit of possibility for the altruist to get really excited about the idea. And it'll be an experiment because missions work pretty well, and if the auction's kind of, if it isn't sustainable as a way to live, then I won't do it. But this first one, it's a classic card, it's a classic recognizable image, and it's something I've been thinking about for many, many years before Wizards announced the Spider-Man set. But it is very much related. So I'll tease that auction, and I'll definitely post about it when it goes live. So I'm pretty excited to share that one.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, that is really exciting. I'll make sure to have links to that. Like once the announcement is released, I can add those in later too. So
yeah. Sorry, just a lot of labor in this one.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. I feel like that's a really cool way to like work on a project that you are super excited about. And I can just like tell from that short description that you are super, super excited about this. So yeah, so if anyone out there, if you are not following SK on Instagram or those other places, go do it right now so you can be informed when the new card drops.
Oh, thank you, Ed. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it, and yeah, always down to talk about Magic.
Yes, yeah, same. That's why I do this. I'm like, I always learn something. I always have a good time. Sweet. I think it's time we wrap up this episode. So yeah, SK, one last thank you very much for making this with me. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone else out there for listening. One last shout out for all of my patrons at the All That Glitters level, which is one, Jeff. Thank you so much for always being here. I appreciate that quite a bit. So sweet. All right. We will see you on the next episode.